Welcome to the DiscipleSmith's podcast. We're looking at the entire Bible in 1 year. We are on part 17, covering Exodus chapters 5 through 7. Thank you for tuning in to the DiscipleSmith's podcast. Well, hello and welcome to the DiscipleSmith's podcast. We have gone all the way through Genesis chapter 1 to Exodus chapter 4 in our journey through the entire Bible in 1 year. Now, that's not the only thing we want to focus on here in the DiscipleSmith's podcast. One of the main things that I would like to accomplish is that me and my son Alex, our last name is Smith, we want to engage in conversation about random topics, about different things that you may be wondering or thinking about, some of our experiences over the years with Christianity and the youth group and asking questions. We just kind of want to have a discussion about those things. And so we are working on that. We've recorded a few things already, and so I hope you find that of interest. If anybody has any topics that you'd like us to cover, just mention it in a comment, send me a message or something like that, or just talk to me in person and say, hey, this would be a great topic for you and Alex to talk about. The goal is that Alex and I are, our last name is Smith, and we want to make disciples. So much like forging a weapon, in ancient times they were known as blacksmiths or silversmiths or any kind of crafting person. So we want to be known for making disciples. So we are the DiscipleSmiths. But without further ado, we're going to get into part 17 of our study. And so we're going to start in chapter 5. Now, I'm reading out of the Holman Christian Standard Version of the Bible. And so if you want to follow along in the same translation, then you can do that with me. So chapter 5, verse 1. Later, Moses and Aaron went in and said to Pharaoh, "This is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival for me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh responded, "Who is Yahweh that I should obey him by letting Israel go? I do not know anything about Yahweh, and besides, I will not let Israel go." Then they answered, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go on a 3-day trip into the wilderness, so that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our God, or else he may strike us with a plague or sword." The king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why are you causing the people to neglect their work? Get to your work." Pharaoh also said, "Look, the people of the land are so numerous, and you would stop them from working." That day Pharaoh commanded the overseers of the people, as well as their foremen, "Don't continue to supply the people with straw for making bricks, as before. They must go and gather straw for themselves. But require the same quota of bricks from them as they were making before. Do not reduce it, for they are slackers. That is why they are crying out, 'Let us go and sacrifice to our God.' Impose heavier work on them. Then they will be occupied with it and not pay attention to deceptive words." So the overseers and foremen of the people went out and said to them, "This is what Pharaoh says. I am not giving you straw. Go get straw yourselves wherever you can find it, but there will be no reduction at all in your workload." So the people scattered throughout the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. The overseers insisted, "Finish your assigned work each day, as you did when straw was provided." Then the Israelite foremen, whom Pharaoh's slave drivers had set over the people, were beaten and asked, "Why haven't you finished making your prescribed number of bricks yesterday or today as you did before?" So the Israelite foreman went in and cried for help to Pharaoh. "Why are you treating your servants this way? No straw has been given to your servants, yet they say to us, 'Make bricks.' Look, your servants are being beaten, but it is your own people who are at fault." But he said, "You are slackers, slackers. That is why you are saying, 'Let us go sacrifice to the Lord.' Now get to work. No straw will be given to you, but you must produce the same quantity of bricks." The Israelite foremen saw that they were in trouble when they were told, "You cannot reduce your daily quota of bricks." When they left Pharaoh, they confronted Moses and Aaron, who stood waiting to meet them. "May the Lord take note of you and judge," they said to them, "because you have made us reek in front of Pharaoh and his officials, putting a sword in their hand to kill us." So Moses went back to the Lord and asked, "Lord, why have you caused trouble for this people? And why did you ever send me? Ever since I went in to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has caused trouble for this people, and you haven't delivered your people at all." Chapter 6. But the Lord replied to Moses, "Now you are going to see what I will do to Pharaoh. He will let them go because of my strong hand. He will drive them out of his land because of my strong hand. Then God spoke to Moses, telling him, I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty. But I did not reveal my name, Yahweh, to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land they lived in as foreigners. Furthermore, I've heard the groaning of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians are forcing to work as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore tell the Israelites, I am Yahweh, and I will deliver you from the forced labor of the Egyptians, and free you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. You will know that I am Yahweh your God, who delivered you from the forced labor of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land that I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am Yahweh. Moses told this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their broken spirit and hard labor. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, Go and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go from this land. But Moses said in the Lord's presence, If the Israelites will not listen to me, then how will Pharaoh listen to me, since I am such a poor speaker? Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, and gave them commands concerning both the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. These are the heads of their fathers' families. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, Hanok and Palu, Hezron and Carmi. These are the clans of Reuben. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. These are the clans of Simeon. These are the names of the sons of Levi according to their genealogy: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Levi lived 137 years. The sons of Gershon, Libni and Shimi, by their clans. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Kohath lived 133 years. The sons of Merari, Mali and Mushi. These are the clans of the Levites according to their genealogy. Amram married his father's sister, Jochebed, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. Amram lived 137 years. The sons of Izhar, Korah, Nepheg, and Zikri. The sons of Uzziel, Mishael, Elzaphan, and Sithri. Aaron married Elisheba, daughter of Amminadab and sister of Nahshon. She bore him Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. The sons of Korah, Asir, Elkanah, and Abiasaph. These are the clans of the Korahites. Aaron's son Eleazar married one of the daughters of Putiel, and she bore him Phinehas. These are the heads of the Levite families by their clans. It was this, Aaron and Moses, whom the Lord told, Bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt according to their divisions. Moses and Aaron were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, in order to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. Chapter 7. There's a couple more verses. On the day the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, he said to them, I am Yahweh. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I am telling you. But Moses replied in the Lord's presence, Since I am such a poor speaker, how will Pharaoh listen to me? Chapter 7. The Lord answered Moses, See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother will be your prophet. You must say whatever I command you. Then Aaron your brother must declare it to Pharaoh, so that he will let the Israelites go from his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh will not listen to you, but I will put my hand on Egypt, and bring the divisions of my people the Israelites out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. The Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh when I stretch out my hand against Egypt, and bring out the Israelites from among them. So Moses and Aaron did this. They did just as the Lord commanded them. Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, When Pharaoh tells you, Perform a miracle, tell Aaron, Take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh. It will become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went in to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord had commanded. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a serpent. But then Pharaoh called the wise men and sorcerers, the magicians of Egypt, and they also did the same thing by their own occult practices. Each one threw down his staff, and it became a serpent. But Aaron's staff swallowed their staffs. However, Pharaoh's heart hardened, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning. When you see him walking out to the water, stand ready to meet him by the bank of the Nile. Take in your hand the staff that turned into a snake. Tell him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to tell you, let my people go, so that they may worship me in the wilderness. But so far you have not listened. This is what Yahweh says. Here is how you will know that I am Yahweh. Watch, I will strike the water in the Nile with the staff in my hand, and it will turn to blood. The fish in the Nile will die, the river will stink, and the Egyptians will be unable to drink water from it. So the Lord said to Moses, Tell Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the rivers, the canals, the ponds, and all the water reservoirs, and they will become blood. There will be blood throughout the land of Egypt, even in wooden and stone containers. Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded. In the sight of Pharaoh and his officials, he raised the staff and struck the water in the Nile, and all the water in the Nile was turned to blood. The fish of the Nile died, and the river smelled so bad the Egyptians could not drink water from it. There was blood throughout the land of Egypt. But the magicians of Egypt did the same thing by their occult practices. So Pharaoh's heart hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Pharaoh turned around, went into his palace, and didn't even take this to heart. All the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink because they could not drink the water from the river. 7 days passed before the Lord struck the Nile. 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile. May God bless the reading of his word here today, and may be used to transform our minds and our hearts to better discern his will. So Moses and Aaron finally returned to confront Pharaoh about allowing God's people, the Israelites, to leave the land for a 3-day journey into the wilderness where they would worship and make sacrifices to their God who had named himself Yahweh, which just means I am who I am. He's self-defining. Nothing can explain his existence. He is beyond space. He is beyond time. He is beyond measure. He is the true God of worship, and he needs the sacrifice to basically cover the sins of the people. And so God commands Moses and Aaron, go to Pharaoh, tell him to let my people go. If not, I'm going to strike this entire land with plagues, and I will force by my mighty hand Pharaoh to relinquish the Israelites. And so that's what Moses and Aaron do, and basically Pharaoh laughs it off. Now, I want to set in place a sort of timeline and a thought process, and I'm going to make in a separate video a deeper explanation because it is very interesting, but it's also confusing. I believe the Pharaoh that Moses and Aaron were talking to right here was Thutmose III. Now, you can look him up and see some of his military exploits. He's known as the Napoleon of Egypt. He was one of the premier warriors, great kings of the ancient world. In fact, he may be the top king who's ever reigned as far as accomplishments go. He brought about an unprecedented prosperity, and he had 17 years in a row where he would lead a major military campaign, and he never lost a single battle. Now, that's very impressive. And he wasn't just like commanding from the back or from a table somewhere. It's reported that he actually led some of the charges in against the peoples that he conquered. So this was a very powerful person, a very powerful figure throughout human history, and somebody to be feared. And by the Egyptian people, he was worshipped. And so Pharaoh, in this sense, represented their God. And so here is Moses and Aaron speaking to the true God, and he comes up to Pharaoh, who I believe is Thutmose III, and he is commanding him to let my people go. Now, God doesn't just ask him to do that. He actually provides Moses and Aaron with some signs to be able to accomplish this goal. And so he has Moses take his staff, and whenever he throws it on the ground, it becomes a serpent, and whenever he picks it back up, it becomes a staff again. Now, this is important because staves in this day were handed down from generation to generation. The father of the household would inscribe his name, hand it down to the younger, and then the younger would have it, and then whenever they were going to pass it on, they would inscribe their name, and so it just had this lineage. Now, maybe, this is just my theory, maybe this staff had the names of everybody tracing their line all the way back to Seth. I'm just throwing that out there. And maybe it even had Adam's name on it. Maybe it was the staff that Noah had whenever he was on the ark. Maybe it was preserved all the way down through here. So whenever God asks Moses, "Give me your staff," I want you to think about that. Does anybody have a family heirloom? Does anybody have something important that belongs to them? What would it take for you to just give that up? How important would that be to you? And so there's an act of faith on Moses' end to relinquish this staff. And whenever he does, God blesses him for it and allows this to be a tool used to convince Pharaoh. But as you'll see, some of the translations say that God hardens Pharaoh's heart. But I believe that through these events, Pharaoh's heart becomes hardened. It's because God intervened, and Pharaoh chose to see it as a bad thing, and he hardened his heart. So God did harden his heart, but it was actually Pharaoh whose heart was hardened by the events. God doesn't change his free will somehow. But anyways, God commands Moses, "Tell Aaron, since you obviously can't speak very well or don't believe you can speak very well, even though I told you I would give you speech, but you're not trusting me with that, tell Aaron to throw the staff down and it'll become a serpent." So he does that in front of Pharaoh. So I would imagine that some of the people were kind of freaking out. So Pharaoh calls the wizards and the magicians and the sorcerers, the people who practice occult practices. They worship demons. They sacrifice to demons to gain power. And this is real power because they bring staves in, they throw them on the ground, and they become snakes. Now, I didn't make that up. That came straight from Scripture. What would it take for us to be able to do that today? There is real power in this demonic occult practice, and they somehow were able to tap in and harness it. So Pharaoh walks away undisturbed by it. So the next thing that God commands Aaron to do is to take the staff and wave it over all the areas, the bodies of water, and everything's going to turn to blood. And it did. But Pharaoh's magicians and sorcerers and wizards also were able to do the same thing. And Scripture says specifically because of their occult practices. That's worship of demons. That's sacrifice to demons. I believe maybe in the Old Testament, these fallen angels, these demons, were able to manifest themselves at times in a physical form. I think maybe some of the statue carvings in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia and all those areas, Assyria, Babylon, maybe they actually witnessed with their own two eyes a demonic presence who had incredible power, and they offered sacrifices to them. And one of my buddies always talks about faith is almost like currency in the spiritual world. And I think about that quite a bit. So if you have faith in these occult practices, it's almost like they're able to spend that currency on power in the real world. Now, at some point, God put an end to that, or at least I think so. Maybe it was whenever Jesus came and he just put an end to all that. Maybe that's whenever the demons and Satan were bound for the 1,000 years. Maybe they can only show up spiritually. They can't manifest themselves in the body. I'm not sure, but it seems like something like that has probably happened. And so this is some strange stuff here, and we're going to see the continuation of these plagues happening, the continuation of God leading his people out with his mighty right hand, and we're going to get into that in the next episode. I'm going to record an episode about Pharaoh and some of the timeline, and so I hope you stay tuned for that. But this has been part 17 in our series through the Bible in 1 year. My name is Kevin, and this is the DiscipleSmith's podcast.